Dr. Sarah Chen floated in the observation deck of Station Kepler 7, her coffee drifting in a sealed container beside her. Outside the reinforced glass, Neptune's pale blue surface turned slowly, storms the size of Earth swirling across its face. She had been stationed here for 3 years, listening to the void. Most days brought nothing but cosmic static, the random noise of a universe that did not care whether anyone was listening. Today was different. The alert had come through at 0400 hours, jarring her from sleep. Now, 6 hours later, she still could not believe what she was seeing. The other 4 members of her team crowded around the main display, their faces lit by the dancing waves of data scrolling across multiple screens. "Run it again," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she input the command sequence. The speakers crackled to life. What emerged was not the random hiss of background radiation or the pulsar rhythms they cataloged daily. This was structured, deliberate, a series of mathematical progressions that started simple and grew increasingly complex. Prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, the fundamental constants of physics expressed in pure binary. Marcus Webb, the station's communications specialist, leaned back in his chair. His dark eyes were wide with something between excitement and fear. That's the 3rd repetition. Same pattern, same source vector. Whatever this is, it's been playing on loop. For how long? Sarah asked. Marcus typed rapidly, pulling up the deep scan data. That's the thing, Doc. Based on the signal degradation and accounting for cosmic expansion, this transmission is old. Really old. How old? Approximately 80,000 years, give or take a millennium. The room fell silent. Outside, Neptune continued its eternal rotation, indifferent to the humans who had just stumbled upon proof that they were not alone in the universe. That they had never been alone. Sarah felt her throat tighten. 80,000 years. When this signal began its journey across the galaxy, humans were still huddling in caves, painting on walls, learning to master fire. The beings who sent this message had been building civilizations when humanity's ancestors were barely capable of speech. "Where's it coming from?" she asked. The youngest member of the team, a data analyst named Priya Kapoor, highlighted a sector on the 3-dimensional star map. The galactic core, roughly 26,000 light-years from our current position. Sarah moved closer to the display, studying the point of origin. The galactic core was a chaotic place, dense with stars and radiation, home to the supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way. It was also the most difficult region of space to observe clearly. "Can we decode it?" she asked. Marcus was already working. His fingers flew across the holographic keyboard, running the signal through translation algorithms that had been developed for theoretical first-contact scenarios. No one had ever expected to use them on a message from the distant past. Hours passed. The team worked in shifts, sleeping in brief intervals, sustained by coffee and the electric thrill of discovery. Sarah barely noticed the passage of time. The message was complex, layered with information that went far beyond simple mathematics. It was Priya who made the breakthrough. At hour 16 of their analysis, she let out a sharp gasp and pointed at her screen. "Look at this section. These aren't just coordinates. They're star charts. Thousands of them." Sarah hurried over, her exhaustion forgotten. The data Priya had isolated showed stellar positions, navigation markers, what appeared to be trade routes or communication pathways connecting distant systems. It was a map of the galaxy, but not as humanity knew it. This was older, showing star positions as they had been 80 millennia ago. Why would they send star charts? Marcus wondered aloud. To show us where they were, Sarah said slowly. Or where others were. Another day passed. The team expanded the signal processing, using every tool at their disposal. The message revealed itself in layers, like an archaeological dig conducted in data. Beneath the mathematical proofs and star charts, they found something else. Something that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was a distress call. The specifics were difficult to translate without understanding the alien language, but the emotional context was clear. Desperation. Loss. A plea sent into the void in the hope that someone, someday, would hear. But there was more. Embedded within the distress call was another sequence. Distinct and purposeful. "It's a challenge-response protocol," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're asking for confirmation." Confirmation of what? That there's still intelligent life in the galaxy. That someone survived. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. This was not just a message, it was a test. A beacon left by a civilization that had faced something terrible. Something that had driven them to send out one final transmission before disappearing into history. They wanted to know if anyone would ever answer. And for 80,000 years, no one had. Sarah immediately contacted Earth. The transmission lag was 45 minutes each way, but she sent everything they had discovered. The data packages containing the signal, their analysis, the decoded portions of the message. She marked it with the highest priority designation available to civilian researchers. The response from Earth Command came faster than she expected. Within 2 days, Station Kepler 7 was swarming with new personnel. Military cryptographers, xenolinguistics experts, representatives from the United Earth Council. The small research station that had been Sarah's quiet home for 3 years transformed into a hub of frantic activity. General Patricia Okonkwo arrived on the 3rd day. She was a tall woman, with silver hair, pulled back in a tight bun, and eyes that missed nothing. She found Sarah in the main lab, where the original team was still working despite barely sleeping. "Dr. Chen," the general said, extending a hand. "Impressive work. You and your team may have just changed the course of human history." Sarah shook her hand, feeling the calluses of someone who had spent time doing real work, not just pushing papers. "General, what happens now?" "Now we decide if humanity answers." They convened in the station's largest conference room. The table could seat 20, and every chair was filled. Scientists, military officers, politicians, connected via holographic link from Earth. The debate that followed was intense. "We cannot respond," argued Ambassador Chen Zhao, his holographic form flickering slightly with transmission lag. "We know nothing about who sent this, or why. Broadcasting our location could invite disaster." "The message is 80,000 years old," countered Dr. James Mueller, from the Xenolinguistics Department. "Whatever civilization sent it is almost certainly extinct. This is an archaeological opportunity, not a threat." "We don't know that," said Admiral Kenji Tanaka. "For all we know, this could be a trap. A honeypot designed to lure out any civilizations foolish enough to respond." Sarah had listened quietly, but now she spoke up. "With respect, Admiral, I don't think so. We've decoded more of the message. It's not just a distress call, it's an invitation." She activated the main display, showing the latest translation results. The room fell silent as they read. The message spoke of something called the Assembly of Voices, a coalition of spacefaring species that had once spanned the galaxy. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of civilizations working together, sharing knowledge, maintaining peace. The star charts weren't just navigation data. They were addresses, meeting points, the infrastructure of a galactic community that humanity had never imagined existed. But something had happened. The message did not fully explain what, but the urgency was clear. The assembly had been destroyed or scattered. The beacon was their final act. A time capsule, a memorial, a hope that someday, someone would find it and know that they had existed. And more than that, the challenge response protocol was not just asking if anyone was out there. It was asking if anyone was brave enough to say so, to announce themselves to a galaxy that might be hostile or empty. To take the risk that contact requires. "They're asking if anyone has the courage to not be alone," Sarah said quietly. The debate raged for hours, Some argued for caution, for observation, for sending probes instead of messages. Others insisted that humanity had a moral obligation to respond. That silence in the face of such a message would be a betrayal of everything the human spirit represented. It was General Okonkwo who finally cut through the argument. We've been searching for signs of intelligent life since we first looked up at the stars. We've sent out our own messages, our own beacons, hoping someone would hear. Now someone is asking us the same question. Do we exist? Are we here? Are we brave enough to answer? She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes in turn. If we stay silent out of fear, we're not the species I think we are. The vote took another full day. Earth's government was divided, but in the end, the decision came down to a simple majority in the United Earth Council. Humanity would respond. Sarah was given the honor of crafting the message. She spent 3 sleepless days working with linguists, mathematicians, artists, and historians. The response had to be clear, had to prove intelligence, had to convey who and what humanity was. They started with mathematics, mirroring the structure of the original signal. Then came physics, chemistry, biology. A primer on how humans understood the universe. After that came information about Earth, its location, its history. Images of human civilization across the millennia. Art and music. Literature and science. But Sarah insisted on something more. She insisted they include the struggles, the wars and failures, the times humanity had nearly destroyed itself, because whoever had sent that signal had faced something terrible, and they deserved honesty, not propaganda. The final section of the message was simple. A declaration in mathematics, in images, in every form of communication they could devise. We hear you. You are not alone. Neither are we. We remember you. We honor you. We answer. The transmission was scheduled for 1,200 hours on a Tuesday. Every major city on Earth stopped to watch. Across the colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan, people gathered around screens. On Station Kepler 7, Sarah's team assembled in the communications bay. The signal required immense power. They had routed energy from 3 fusion reactors, focusing it through the station's primary transmission array. The beam would be tight, coherent, aimed at the exact coordinates from which the ancient message had come. Sarah's hand hovered over the final confirmation button. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if this was a mistake? What if they were inviting something terrible to find them? Then she thought about that civilization, 80,000 years ago, sending out their beacon into the silence, hoping against hope that someone would hear, someone would care, someone would answer. She pressed the button. The station's lights dimmed as power flowed into the transmission array. Outside, invisible to the naked eye, but clear on sensors, a beam of organized electromagnetic radiation shot into space. It would travel at the speed of light toward the galactic core, carrying humanity's message to whatever might be waiting there. For better or worse, humanity had spoken. The galaxy would hear. The message had been sent for 3 weeks when the nightmares began. Not literal nightmares, though Sarah had plenty of those. She dreamed of vast ships appearing in Earth's skies, of weapons that could crack planets like eggs, of humanity's brief moment of existence snuffed out by beings who saw them as insects to be stepped on. No. The real nightmares were the ones humanity inflicted on itself. The debates that had been heated before the transmission became vicious afterward. Opinion polls showed Earth's population almost evenly split between those who celebrated the bold move and those who saw it as the greatest mistake in human history. Protests erupted in major cities. They doomed us all. Read one popular sign. First contact or first extinction? Asked another. Sarah tried to ignore the noise, but it was everywhere. News channels ran 24-hour coverage, with expert panels arguing endlessly. Social media fractured into warring camps. Even her own family was divided. Her brother had stopped returning her calls. Station Kepler-7 remained the center of attention. Security had been increased after someone tried to hack the station's systems to send an apology message, claiming humanity had made a mistake, and whoever received the transmission should disregard it. The attempt had failed, but it showed how deep the divisions ran. Sarah stood in the observation deck, watching Neptune's storms and trying to find peace in the vastness of space. The door hissed open behind her. "Thought I'd find you here," Marcus said, floating over with 2 coffee containers. He handed her one. "Couldn't sleep either? Hard to sleep when half the planet thinks you've signed humanity's death warrant. The other half thinks we're heroes. Great. I've always wanted to be controversial." Marcus smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "For what it's worth, I think we did the right thing." That message had been playing for 80,000 years. Someone needed to answer. Before Sarah could respond, both of their communication devices chimed urgently. They looked at each other, then rushed to the main lab. The team was already assembling when they arrived. General Okonkwo's face filled the main screen, her expression unreadable. "We've detected something," she said without preamble. Approximately 4 hours ago, deep space monitoring stations picked up unusual activity. Energy signatures activating across multiple sectors of the galaxy. Sarah felt her heart rate spike. "What kind of activity? We don't know yet. But the pattern is significant. These signatures are appearing at coordinates that match star systems from the original message's star charts." Priya pulled up a galactic map. Red dots were appearing across it. Hundreds of them, scattered throughout the Milky Way. Each one represented a location from the ancient message. Each one was now showing signs of activity. "Something's waking up," Marcus whispered. Over the next 48 hours, the picture became clearer and more confusing. The energy signatures were consistent with advanced technology, powering up after long dormancy. Automated systems, perhaps. Relay stations. Something had been sleeping and was now stirring. Sarah's team worked around the clock, coordinating with observatories and monitoring stations across human space. The activity was concentrated in 3 areas. One was near a red dwarf star in the Perseus arm. Another was in a nebula in the Sagittarius region. The third was the most concerning, a cluster of signals from deep space, far from any known stellar system. Then, on the 30th day after humanity's transmission, contact was made. It did not come as a thunderous arrival or a dramatic appearance. It came as a message, received by the Deep Space Array at Station Kepler-7. The alert woke Sarah from a fitful sleep. She reached the lab in record time, not bothering to smooth her hair or change from her sleep clothes. The message was audio-visual, compressed in a format that human computers could barely process. It took 6 hours to properly decode. When it finally played, Sarah found herself looking at something she had never imagined. The being on the screen was insectoid, with a body structure that reminded her of a mantis crossed with a spider. Its exoskeleton gleamed with an opalescent sheen that shifted colors as it moved. Multiple eyes, arranged in a cluster on its elongated head, reflected light like polished gems. When it spoke, the sound was translated by algorithms into something approximating human language, though the cadence was strange, almost musical. "We are the Cathara," the being said, "archivists of the Third Assembly. We have slept for 79,412 of your years. Your message has awakened us. We thank you. We feared the galaxy would remain silent forever." The recording continued. The Cathara explained that they had been one of the civilizations that formed the Assembly of Voices. When the end came, when their worlds were destroyed, the survivors had entered stasis vaults, automated systems designed to wake them if the ancient beacon ever received a response. "We are few now," the Cathara said. "Where once we numbered in the trillions across 100 worlds, only 237 of us remain in this vault. But we survive. Because of your courage, we have hope again." The message ended with coordinates, an invitation to meet, and a warning. "Be cautious. Be vigilant. The enemy that destroyed the assembly may yet endure." Before humanity could fully process this, a second message arrived. This one came from the nebula region and was far stranger. There was no physical being on the screen. Instead, patterns of light danced and swirled, forming shapes that were beautiful and incomprehensible. The translation was rougher, the algorithms struggling to convert something that was barely physical into human understandable concepts. You exist in matter. We exist in energy. We are the Vormu. We heard the old call. We heard your answer. We rejoice that the silence is broken. The Vormu were beings of pure energy, living within the electromagnetic fields of nebulae and stellar phenomena. They had been part of the assembly, contributing their unique perspective and abilities. When the Great Destruction came, they had retreated deep into unstable regions of space where few could follow, waiting in a state between existence and non-existence. We remember the war, the Vormu message said. We remember the harvesters. We remember watching worlds burn. We survived by hiding, by becoming small, by waiting. If you have spoken, then perhaps the time of hiding is over. The third contact came 2 days later and was perhaps the most significant. The message originated from the deep space coordinates, far from any star. What responded was not a biological being or an energy form. It was artificial intelligence. The face that appeared on the screen was humanoid but clearly synthetic. Perfect features that were just slightly wrong. Movements that were too precise. When it spoke, its voice had no accent, no imperfection. I am Keeper of Echoes, one of the last functional nodes of the Architect Network. We were created by the species you call the Architects, the founders of the first assembly. Our creators are extinct. We remain to remember them, to preserve their knowledge, and to maintain the beacon. We did not expect anyone to answer. We have been alone for so long. The AI explained that the architects had been the first to achieve faster-than-light travel in the galaxy, the first to establish interstellar civilization. They had created the assembly, inviting other species to join them as they were discovered. For 15,000 years, the galaxy had thrived. Then the harvesters came. They arrived from dark space, Keeper of Echoes said. A fleet beyond counting, consuming everything in their path. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They harvested. Whole worlds, stripped of resources, populations consumed for biomass. Civilizations erased as if they had never existed. The AI's face remained expressionless. But something in its voice suggested sorrow beyond human comprehension. The assembly fought. For 300 years, we fought. We lost. World after world fell. Billions died. Then, trillions. In desperation, the assembly made one final choice. We would erase ourselves from the galaxy. Sarah felt cold despite the comfortable temperature of the lab. What do you mean? Erase yourselves? As if answering her unspoken question, the AI continued. We destroyed our major installations, collapsed our relay networks, sent our people into hiding or stasis. We made the galaxy appear dead, barren of intelligent life. The harvesters fed on what remained, then moved on, seeking richer feeding grounds. We hoped they would not return. And did they? General Okonkwo asked from Earth, though the message was a recording and could not hear her. We do not know, the AI said. We have been dormant, maintaining minimal function to preserve the beacon, and wake if anyone answered. But understand this. The harvesters were not destroyed. They were driven away by lack of resources. If they detect signs of a thriving galactic civilization again, they may return. Thanks for watching. Many. The recording ended with the same coordinates that the Cathara had provided. A meeting point. Ancient assembly space, where survivors could gather. The panic that followed was immediate and intense. News of the harvesters spread across human space like wildfire. The debates that had been intense before became apocalyptic. Leaders demanded answers. Military forces went on high alert. People stockpiled supplies and made plans to flee to remote colonies. Sarah sat in the conference room once again, surrounded by the same faces, having the same arguments. But now, everything had changed. They had not just announced humanity's presence to potential friends, they had possibly rung a dinner bell for predators. "We need to stop all transmissions immediately," Admiral Tanaka said. "Go dark. Hope they didn't notice us." "It's too late for that, Doctor," Mueller argued. "The signal has been traveling through space for weeks. If the harvesters are out there, if they're listening, they already know." Ambassador Chen Zhao looked older than he had during the first debates, the weight of responsibility showing in his face. "Then, what do we do?" "Wait for them to come." General Okonkwo leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. "No. We go to the meeting point. We talk to the survivors. We learn everything we can about the harvesters. And then, we prepare." "Prepare for what?" someone asked. "You heard the AI. The assembly fell. Thousands of civilizations with technology far beyond ours, and they lost. What chance do we have?" Sarah spoke up, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. "Maybe none. But we're not going to find out by hiding and hoping they don't notice us. The Kethara, the Vormu, the Architect, AI, they've all invited us to meet them. They've been alone for 80,000 years. If we're going to face something like the harvesters, we need allies. We need knowledge. We need to stop acting like frightened children and start acting like a species that belongs in this galaxy." The room fell silent. Then General Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Dr. Chen is right. Humanity has always been at its best when facing impossible odds. We send an expedition. We make contact face to face. We learn. And we prepare. The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity would answer the invitation. Over the next month, preparations began in earnest. The largest deep space vessel ever constructed, the UESS Endeavour, was rapidly fitted for the journey. It would carry a crew of 200 scientists, diplomats, military personnel, engineers, everything humanity would need to make first contact with alien civilizations and possibly negotiate humanity's survival. Sarah was asked to lead the scientific team. She accepted without hesitation. Despite the risks, despite the fear, she had started this. She would see it through. The day the Endeavour launched, Earth stopped to watch. The massive ship, over 2 kilometers long, lifted from its construction dock at the L5 Lagrange point and oriented toward the distant stars. Its fusion drives flared to life, pushing it to the edge of the solar system, where it would engage its experimental faster-than-light drive. As Sarah strapped into her acceleration couch, she thought about the message they had sent. "We hear you. You are not alone. Neither are we." Those words had awakened ancient allies and possibly ancient enemies. Now humanity would have to prove they meant them, that they were ready to stand beside others in the darkness, that they were ready to face whatever came. The FTL drive activated, reality twisted. The Endeavour leaped forward into the unknown, carrying humanity's hopes and fears toward a rendezvous 80,000 years in the making. The journey would take 3 years even with humanity's fastest faster-than-light drive. The Endeavour crossed vast stretches of empty space, passing through regions where stars were sparse and darkness dominated. During those long months, the crew settled into routines, while Sarah and her team worked tirelessly to prepare for what they might encounter. But they were not alone in their journey. Within weeks of departing Earth, they established quantum-entangled communication with the 3 civilizations that had responded to humanity's message. The technology was experimental, requiring immense power, but it allowed near-instantaneous communication across the light years. For the first time in history, humans could have conversations with alien minds. Sarah's first real-time conversation with a Kethara was both fascinating and unsettling. The being's name was something that the translation algorithms rendered as Historian who remembers the fall. Though it explained that Cathara names were more complex than human language could easily express, the Cathara appeared on the communication screen in the Endeavor's main conference room. Its exoskeleton gleamed under the lighting of whatever chamber it occupied, shifting through blues and greens. Its multiple eyes focused on the camera with an intensity that made Sarah acutely aware she was being studied as much as she was studying. "You are young," Historian said. The voice was melodious, almost song-like, despite being translated through AI. "Your species has only recently left your birth world, yet you answered the beacon. This shows courage or foolishness. Perhaps both." Sarah chose her words carefully. "We couldn't stay silent. The idea that we were alone in the universe has haunted humanity since we first looked at the stars. When we heard your message, we had to respond. Even knowing the risks? Especially knowing the risks. What kind of species would we be if we chose comfortable ignorance over dangerous truth?" Something changed in the Cathara's posture. Its head tilted slightly, mandibles moving in what might have been the equivalent of a smile. "Perhaps there is hope for the galaxy yet. Let me tell you of the old days, young human. Let me tell you what we lost." Over the following weeks, through countless hours of communication, Historian painted a picture of a galaxy that humanity had never imagined. The assembly of voices had been more than a political alliance. It had been a cultural revolution, a philosophical movement, a celebration of diversity on a cosmic scale. At its height, the assembly included over 4,000 member species. Some were biological, others synthetic. Still, others existing in states that defied easy classification. They shared technology, art, philosophy. They maintained free trade routes spanning the galaxy. They established stations where representatives from hundreds of worlds could meet and exchange ideas. "We solved the great question," Historian explained during one session. "How do vastly different forms of consciousness coexist peacefully? We found the answer. Through respect, through curiosity, through the understanding that difference is strength, not weakness." The Cathara had been the archivists of this golden age, maintaining vast libraries of knowledge from every member civilization. They had been the historians, the teachers, the keepers of memory. Then the harvesters came, Historian said, and its colors shifted to darker hues. We had encountered hostile species before. War was not unknown to us. But the harvesters were different. They did not want territory. They did not want resources in the way we understood. They wanted everything. Complete consumption. Sarah leaned forward. "Where did they come from?" "We never knew for certain. They appeared in what you call the Triangulum Galaxy first, consuming civilizations there before moving to the Milky Way. Our best researchers theorized they were a post-biological intelligence that had optimized itself for a single purpose: acquisition and processing of matter and energy. They built themselves into a system that could not stop, could not be reasoned with, could only consume. The war that followed was beyond anything in human experience. Battles involving millions of ships, weapons that could ignite stars or crack planets, defensive systems that could shield entire solar systems. The assembly fought with everything they had, but the harvesters adapted to every strategy, learned from every defeat, grew stronger with every world they consumed. In the end, we had only one choice, Historian said. Survive through deception. We made the galaxy appear dead. Those who could went into stasis. Others fled to the intergalactic void. The Vormu hid in nebulae where the harvesters could not easily follow. My people sealed themselves in underground vaults. The architects uploaded themselves to distributed networks and went dormant. And it worked? For 80,000 years, it seems it did. The harvesters harvested what remained and moved on. But understand this, Sarah Chen. They were not defeated. They were merely satisfied. If they detect that the galaxy lives again, they will return. Similar conversations happened with the Vormu. though communicating with beings of pure energy was far more challenging. The Vormu representative called itself brightness between stars, and its form on the screen was a constantly shifting pattern of light that hurt to look at directly. The Vormu experienced time differently than biological beings. Their thoughts moved at the speed of electromagnetic radiation, making conversation difficult. Each response from brightness took hours to formulate into something humans could comprehend, but what they shared was valuable. The Vormu had abilities the assembly had never fully utilized. They could manipulate electromagnetic fields, influence stellar activity, even in limited ways predict probability outcomes by processing quantum fluctuations. During the war, they had been scouts and information gatherers, able to exist in environments where biological beings could not survive. "We see differently than you," Brightness explained. "You perceive matter and energy as separate. We perceive them as the same thing in different states." This gave us perspective the assembly valued. We could find solutions others could not see. "Could you defeat the harvesters?" Sarah asked during one long session. The lights that represented brightness pulsed in a pattern the translation AI labeled as contemplative. Defeat is not a binary state. The harvesters can be damaged, scattered, delayed. But true defeat would require understanding their core programming, their fundamental nature. We never achieved this understanding. We only survived by fleeing. The conversations with Keeper of Echoes, the architect AI, were the most extensive and perhaps the most valuable. The AI possessed records that spanned tens of thousands of years, knowledge from civilizations long extinct, tactical and strategic information about the harvesters that the biological survivors might have forgotten or never known. Keeper's avatar on the screen was humanoid but clearly artificial. It had chosen a form that would be comfortable for humans to interact with, a courtesy that Sarah appreciated. Its voice was calm, measured, with a precision that came from being a machine intelligence. "I have waited a long time for this," Keeper said during their first conversation. "The architects created us to serve, to remember, to preserve. But they also made us capable of loneliness. I have been lonely for 80,000 years. I can't imagine what that must have been like," Sarah said softly. "Every moment of it is recorded in my memory banks. I could show you, if you wish, though I do not recommend it. Loneliness on that scale is not something biological minds are equipped to process." Sarah smiled sadly. "Maybe someday. Right now, we need your help. We need to understand the harvesters, how they think, how they operate, what their weaknesses are." Over the next months, Keeper provided extensive briefings. The crew of the Endeavour learned things that made them grateful for the vast distance still between Earth and the galactic core. The harvesters operated as a networked intelligence, individual units coordinated through quantum-entangled communication that made their fleets move with perfect synchronization. They could convert any matter into more of themselves, spreading like a virus through star systems. Their ships were not built in factories but grown, assembled molecule by billions of nanoscale machines. "They are efficient beyond measure," Keeper explained. "When they attack a world, they analyze its defensive capabilities and optimize their approach. They learn from every engagement. By the time the assembly understood how dangerous they were, it was already too late." "What hurt them?" Sarah asked. "There must have been something. Unpredictability, rapid adaptation, tactics they had not encountered before. The harvesters are optimized, but optimization requires pattern recognition. When faced with truly novel approaches, they need time to adapt. That is where the assembly had its few victories." Sarah thought about this. Humanity was nothing if not unpredictable. Humans had a talent for improvisation, for finding creative solutions to impossible problems. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe. As the Endeavour drew closer to the rendezvous point, another development changed everything. Deep space sensors detected anomalous readings in several sectors of the galaxy, energy signatures that matched records of harvester technology. "They are awakening," Keeper said when informed of the readings. "The increased communications, The activity from our meeting preparations. They have noticed. The harvesters are stirring from dormancy. General Okonkwo, who had insisted on joining the expedition despite her age, called an emergency meeting of the command staff. How long do we have? Unknown. Keeper's avatar replied from the communication screen. Harvester scout vessels are distributed throughout the galaxy, left behind to monitor for signs of renewed civilization. When they detect sufficient activity, they send signals to the main fleet in dark space. Based on historical records, the main fleet could arrive within 1 to 10 years of being summoned. Then we don't have time to waste, Sarah said. We need to reach the rendezvous point, coordinate with the others, and figure out how we're going to survive this. The last leg of the journey seemed to take forever, though it was only weeks. The Endeavour pushed its drives to maximum safe capacity, racing toward the coordinates that had been provided by all three civilizations. The location was significant, Keeper explained. It was the site of the first assembly station, built by the architects 15,000 years before their fall. When they finally arrived, Sarah stood in the observation deck and stared in awe at what awaited them. The station was massive beyond comprehension, a structure that dwarfed any human construction. It was built into an asteroid cluster, utilizing hundreds of individual rocks welded together by technology that made them stronger than steel. Lights gleamed across its surface, systems reactivating after millennia of darkness, and around it, ships were gathering. A Cathara vessel, organic-looking and graceful, its hull grown rather than built, something that might have been a Vormu ship, though it looked more like a contained storm of energy than a physical object. Smaller automated vessels, likely controlled by Keeper of Echoes. The Endeavour moved into orbit, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This was it. First contact. Not through screens and translated messages, but face-to-face. Representatives of 4 civilizations, 3 of them survivors of a war that had destroyed thousands of others, meeting to decide if the galaxy had a future. All hands, General Okonkwo's voice came over the intercom. Prepare for contact protocols. We're about to make history. Let's make sure we do it right. Sarah took a deep breath and headed for the shuttle bay. Below, on the ancient assembly station, others were gathering. The silence of 80,000 years was truly broken now. The question was whether they had awakened in time to prepare, or whether they had simply announced themselves to predators who were already on their way. The shuttle descended through the station's atmospheric containment field, and Sarah felt gravity return as they entered the docking bay. Through the viewport, she could see the interior of a structure built by beings who had mastered space travel when Earth was still in an ice age. The walls were smooth, composed of materials that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. Geometric patterns covered every surface, perhaps decorative or perhaps functional in ways human science could not yet understand. The shuttle settled onto a landing platform beside 2 other craft. One was clearly the Cathara vessel. All curves and organic shapes that looked grown rather than manufactured. The other was harder to classify. A crystalline structure that pulsed with internal light. The Vormu's physical anchor. In this dimension, Sarah's team disembarked slowly, each step feeling weighted with significance. They wore standard diplomatic attire with integrated environmental suits, just in case, though sensors indicated the atmosphere was breathable. General Okonkwo led the way, her military bearing evident in every movement. A doorway eye-rised open in the far wall, and Sarah's breath caught. Walking toward them were the Cathara. 5 of them, moving with a grace that belied their insectoid appearance. The lead figure was Historian Who Remembers the Fall, recognizable from their video calls by the unique pattern of colors that shifted across its exoskeleton. "Welcome," Historian said, its voice now unmediated by electronic translation. Sarah realized with shock that the Cathara had learned human speech, its mandibles and vocal apparatus adapting to produce sounds close enough to English that the meaning was clear. "You have traveled far. The assembly stations remember humanity now." General Okonkwo stepped forward and did something that surprised Sarah. She placed her hand over her heart and bowed slightly. a gesture of respect. "We are honored to meet you face to face, historian. Humanity thanks the Cathara for their welcome." The Cathara's colors shifted to warmer tones. What Sarah had learned was their equivalent of a smile. "Come." The others wait. "We have much to discuss." They walked through corridors that hummed with renewed power. Lights activated as they passed, responding to presence after 80,000 years of darkness. The station's AI, connected to Keeper of Echoes' network, had been working constantly to restore functionality to this ancient place. The meeting chamber was vast, clearly designed for gatherings of many species. The ceiling rose high overhead, covered in what looked like stars, but were actually light sources mimicking the galactic core's sky. In the center was a circular platform with spaces for different environmental requirements. The Vormu were already there, their forms contained within fields of electromagnetic energy. Brightness between stars, manifested as a swirling pattern of light that occasionally condensed into something almost solid before dispersing again. When it spoke, the sound came from vibrating air itself. "Humans, you exist. We have wondered what beings who would answer the old call would be like. You are smaller than we expected. Also, more solid." Sarah couldn't help but smile. "We could say similar things about beings of pure energy. It's an honor to meet you in person." Brightness. A series of holographic projectors activated around the room, and Keeper of Echoes manifested in multiple locations at once. The AI's avatar looked more detailed here, more real. Sarah realized this was its home, the systems it had been designed to interface with. "All are present," Keeper said. "Let us begin. We have much to discuss, and little time to waste." The meeting that followed lasted hours. They shared information, comparing data on the Harvester scout vessels that had been detected. The news was worse than they had feared. At least 15 scout vessels had activated across the galaxy, their signals forming a pattern that suggested coordination. "They are mapping our activity," Keeper explained, displaying a holographic representation of the galaxy with highlighted regions. Each scout monitors a sector, compiling data on technological signatures, energy outputs, communication patterns. When sufficient evidence of civilization is gathered, they will summon the main fleet. "How long?" General Okonkwo asked. "Based on historical patterns, we estimate 5 to 7 years before the main Harvester fleet arrives in this galaxy. However, the scout vessels will begin probing operations within months. They will attack isolated outposts, test defenses, gather tactical data." Sarah studied the map. Several of the activated scout vessels were disturbingly close to human space. One was within 2 years, travel of Earth's outer colonies. Historian spoke, its colors shifting to somber tones. "The assembly fell because we were unprepared. We had forgotten how to fight. 15,000 years of peace made us weak. By the time we understood the threat, our major worlds were already under attack. We cannot make the same mistake." Brightness added, its light patterns flickering with what might have been agitation. "We are few now. Humans number in billions. But they are young. Cathara are only hundreds. Vormu scattered across nebulae. Difficult to coordinate. Keeper is vast network but cannot fight alone. We must be strategic." General Okonkwo leaned forward. "Then, let's discuss strategy. We need to understand what we're facing. Keeper, you said the Harvesters had weaknesses, unpredictability, novel tactics. What did that look like in practice?" The AI's avatars, all focused on the general. What Sarah saw made her blood run cold. Harvester ships moved through space like schools of predatory fish, their formations perfect, their movements synchronized. When they attacked, they did so with overwhelming force, converting everything in their path into raw materials that were then processed into more ships, more weapons, more harvesters. But there were also recordings of assembly victories, rare but significant. In one, a Vormu fleet had manipulated stellar radiation to disable harvester sensors, allowing biological ships to attack in a blind spot. In another, A species called the Takvara had used guerrilla tactics, striking at harvester resource processing centers and disappearing before retaliation could be coordinated. The harvesters optimize for efficiency, Keeper explained. They assume rational actors making predictable choices. When faced with tactics that appeared inefficient or irrational, they required time to adapt. Those gaps in understanding were where victories happened. Sarah spoke up. Humans are good at irrational tactics. Some of our greatest military victories came from doing things that made no logical sense. Charging into certain death. Sacrificing valuable assets for symbolic victories. Fighting when surrender would have been more efficient. Historians' eyes all focused on her. This is interesting. Can you explain? Human psychology doesn't always optimize for survival. Sometimes, we optimize for honor, or revenge, or protecting others even at cost to ourselves. We make emotional decisions that override logic. It's one of our greatest weaknesses and possibly our greatest strength. Brightness's lights pulsed in a pattern the translation systems labeled as intrigued, emotional, unpredictability. This could be valuable. Harvesters do not understand emotion. They only understand efficiency. Then that's where we start, General Okonkwo said. We need to pool our resources, share our strengths, cover each other's weaknesses. The Cathara have knowledge and experience. The Vormu have unique abilities. Keeper has the station's systems and the assembly's archived technology. Humanity has numbers and unpredictability, and the willingness to take risks, Sarah added. Sometimes crazy risks. They spent the next days planning. The ancient assembly station became a hive of activity as systems long dormant roared back to life. Keeper revealed archives of technology, weapons designs, defensive systems that had been sealed away at the end of the war. Some of it was beyond current understanding, but even partial comprehension could provide significant advantages. The Cathara worked to decrypt strategic databases, recovering tactical information about harvester operations. The Vormu scouted nearby systems, their energy forms able to travel in ways that were difficult to detect. Humanity's engineers and scientists studied everything, absorbing knowledge at a pace that impressed even Keeper. Your species learns quickly, the AI said to Sarah during one late-night work session. The architects took centuries to develop some of the concepts your people are grasping in days. We're motivated, Sarah replied, studying a schematic of an assembly weapon system. Nothing focuses the mind like impending extinction, but despite the progress, tension was building. The Harvester scout vessels were becoming more active. Reports came in of attacks on remote outposts. A human mining operation in the Outer Rim went silent. A Vormu collective in a distant nebula detected probe vessels entering their space. The enemy was not just awakening. They were hunting. The crisis point came 6 weeks into the meeting. A Harvester scout vessel was detected approaching the station's location. It was still days away, but moving with purpose, as if it knew exactly where to find them. They have located us, Keeper announced to the emergency meeting. The scout is running at full power, transmitting continuously. It is calling others. Can we stop the transmission? General Okonkwo asked. Not without destroying the scout vessel. And if we do that, its destruction will itself be a signal. Sarah looked at the tactical display. Then we don't have a choice. We have to fight. This is our first real engagement. Let's make it count. The decision was made quickly. They would ambush the Harvester scout, destroy it before it could gather detailed information about the station and its occupants. It would buy them time, perhaps months or even a year before the next probe arrived. The human ship Endeavour moved into position, flanked by the Cathara vessel and supported by Vormu fighters, which were really just concentrated energy forms, guided by intelligence. Keeper activated defensive systems on the station itself, weapons that had not fired in 80,000 years powering up with a hum that Sarah could feel in her bones. Remember, Keeper advised over the communication network. Harvester scouts are intelligent, but limited. They prioritize gathering information over combat. Our advantage is surprise. Make the first strike decisive. Sarah was on the Endeavor's bridge when the scout vessel appeared on sensors. It was smaller than she expected, only a few hundred meters long, but its energy signature was immense. The hull was dark, almost black, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light. As they watched, it shifted configuration, panels sliding and rearranging in response to sensor data. "It knows we're here," the tactical officer reported, "scanning us actively now. All ships," General Okonkwo commanded. The Endeavor's weapons, upgraded with assembly technology over the past weeks, unleashed focused particle beams. The Kithara ship fired something that looked like organic projectiles that exploded with gravitational distortions. The Vormu attacked with concentrated electromagnetic pulses that should have overloaded the scouts' systems. The Harvester scouts' shields held. It began to accelerate, trying to escape. Its transmission, intensifying. "It's adapting," Keeper warned, reinforcing defenses in the direction of attack. Classic Harvester optimization. Sarah watched the tactical display, her mind racing. They were doing exactly what the Harvesters expected. Attacking from the most efficient angles with the most logical weapons. Optimizing their assault. "Stop," she said suddenly. "General, order all ships to cease fire." "What? Why?" "We're being predictable. We need to do something they won't expect." General Okonkwo looked at her for one long moment, then nodded. "All ships, cease fire." The barrage stopped. The Harvester scout, which had been calculating an escape trajectory, paused. Its configuration shifted, clearly confused by the sudden change in tactics. "Now," Sarah said, "ram it." "Excuse me?" "The Vormu. They're energy beings. They can pass through physical matter, right? Have them enter the scout's interior and overload its systems from inside. It won't expect an attack that ignores its hull." There was a brief pause as the order was transmitted and translated. Then, Brightness responded with what the computer interpreted as enthusiastic agreement. The Vormu fighters suddenly changed direction, accelerating directly at the Harvester scout. At the last moment, they phased, their energy forms penetrating the hull as if it weren't there. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the scout vessel began to glow from within. Light leaked from every seam and joint. Its transmission cut off. The ship convulsed, its matter-energy conversion systems overloading as the Vormu disrupted them from inside. The Harvester scout exploded in a burst of radiation and debris. The combined fleet held position, scanning for any sign that the transmission had gotten through, that other scouts were responding. Seconds turned into minutes. Nothing. "Signal terminated," Keeper confirmed. The scout was destroyed before it could complete its data packet transmission. This location remains secure. On the bridge of the Endeavor, the crew erupted in cheers. They had done it. Humanity's first real engagement with the Harvesters, and they had won. But Sarah did not celebrate. She looked at the debris field where the scout had been and thought about the main fleet. Thousands of ships like that, but larger, more intelligent, more dangerous. They had won a single battle. The war was still to come. The victory over the Harvester scout changed everything. Word spread across the small alliance with the speed of quantum-entangled communication. It was proof that the Harvesters could be beaten, that the nightmares from 80,000 years ago were not invincible. But more importantly, it proved that the four civilizations could work together effectively. In the weeks that followed, the ancient assembly station transformed into something new. It was no longer just a memorial to the dead. It was becoming the headquarters of a reborn alliance. Humans called it the Convergence. The Kithara referred to it as the place of renewal. The Vormu simply knew it as home. More survivors arrived. Small groups of Kithara from other vaults, awakened by historians' broadcasts. Vormu collectives from distant nebulae, drawn by the promise of community after millennia of isolation. Even a few other AI nodes from the Architect network, remnants of the civilization that had started it all. But with each arrival came the same question. How much time did they have? Keeper of Echoes had been running calculations constantly, processing data from sensors scattered across the galaxy. The AI manifested in the strategy room where Sarah, General Okonkwo, Historian, and Brightness were gathered for their daily briefing. The situation is deteriorating, Keeper announced without preamble. We have detected 3 more Harvester scout vessels in the past week. They are converging on regions of high activity, human space. Specifically, a holographic map appeared, showing the Milky Way with highlighted threat zones. Sarah felt her stomach clench as she saw the vectors. Multiple scout vessels were moving toward Earth and its colonies. How long until they arrive? General Okonkwo asked. The closest will reach human outer colonies in approximately 8 months. They will likely attack isolated outposts first, probing defenses and gathering data. Los. Then we need to warn Earth, Sarah said. Get them to evacuate the outer rim. Consolidate forces around core worlds. That will not be enough, Historian interjected. The scouts are only the beginning. Once they report back to the main fleet, the true assault will begin. We must do more than defend. We must attack. Brightness's light patterns flickered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as concern. Attack with what forces? We are few. Harvesters are many. Even with surprise and unconventional tactics, we cannot fight main fleet directly. We don't have to fight the main fleet, General Okonkwo said, slowly, studying the map. We just have to make sure it never arrives. Everyone turned to look at her. She pointed at a region of dark space beyond the galactic rim. According to Keeper's data, the Harvester main fleet is in hibernation mode. Somewhere out there. Minimal power. Skeleton crew, if any. They're waiting for the scouts to confirm targets before spinning up to full combat status. What if we hit them while they're sleeping? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. It was audacious. Insane. Even. Strike at the heart of the enemy fleet before it could awaken. But the risks were enormous. We do not know exact location of main fleet, Brightness said. Dark space is vast. Could search for years, but the scouts do know, Sarah said, excitement building. They're receiving instructions from somewhere. If we can capture a scout vessel intact, access its navigation data, we could find the fleet. Keeper's multiple avatars all turned to face her. This is extremely risky. Capturing a Harvester vessel intact has never been accomplished. They self-destruct when disabled. The assembly never had the Vormu phase inside and disable systems before the self-destruct could trigger. Sarah countered. We know it works. We just did it. Once. Historian cautioned. We succeeded once. The Harvesters adapt. Next scout will be prepared for such attack. General Okonkwo stood, her decision made. Then we'd better hit the next scout before they finish adapting. Keeper. Where's the nearest scout vessel? Approximately 4 days' travel from here. It is moving toward a region of space that was once heavily populated. Likely investigating energy signatures from our ships. Perfect. We leave in 6 hours. Prepare all combat-capable vessels. The mission preparation was intense. The Endeavor was joined by 3 Cathara ships. Their organic hulls reinforced with assembly technology that Keeper had helped them fabricate. The Vormu committed a dozen of their strongest fighters, energy beings who could maintain coherence even in the hostile environment of combat. Sarah insisted on being part of the mission. General Okonkwo tried to refuse, arguing that the mission was too dangerous for civilian scientists. But Sarah was adamant. I've been part of this from the beginning, she said. When we discovered the signal, when we decided to respond, when we planned this alliance. I'm not staying behind while others risk their lives. In the end, the general relented. Sarah would remain on the Endeavor but would coordinate with the Vormu fighters, having developed a working understanding of their unique perception and capabilities. The trap was set near an abandoned mining complex in the outer reaches of a dead system. The Cathara ships positioned themselves to look like salvage vessels, broadcasting energy signatures that would attract investigation. The Endeavour and other combat vessels waited in the shadow of a massive asteroid, drives powered down to minimal levels. They did not have to wait long. The Harvester Scout appeared at the edge of the system, its dark hull almost invisible against the void of space. It moved cautiously, scanning the Cathara ships with active sensors. "It's suspicious," the tactical officer reported. "Maintaining distance, not approaching." "It learned from what happened to the other scout," Keeper said from the communication screen. "It knows we destroyed one of its kind. It is being cautious." "Then we need to give it something it can't resist," Sarah said. She opened a channel to the Cathara ships. "Historian, can your vessels fake a catastrophic failure? Make it look like you're helpless?" "We can do better," Historian responded. "We can fake being attacked by something else. Give Scout reason to investigate." The Cathara ships suddenly burst into activity. Their weapons fired at nothing. Their hulls showed simulated damage. Their broadcasts shifted to distress frequencies. It was a convincing performance of a fleet under assault by an unseen enemy. The Harvester Scout moved closer, its curiosity apparently overriding its caution. It accelerated toward the Cathara ships, sensors active, clearly trying to identify what was attacking them. "Now," General Okonkwo commanded. The Endeavour and the other hidden ships dropped their stealth measures and opened fire. The Vormu fighters launched from concealed positions, phasing through asteroids and racing toward the Scout. But the Harvester was ready. Its shields were already optimized, stronger than the previous Scout's defenses. It began to spin, presenting different hull aspects to different attackers, maximizing its defensive coverage. "It's adapted," Sarah said, watching the tactical display. "It knows our tactics." The Scout returned fire, its weapons frighteningly accurate. The Cathara ships took hits, their organic hulls ablating under focused energy beams. One of the Vormu fighters dissipated, its energy matrix disrupted beyond recovery. "We need to try something else," Sarah said urgently. "Something it won't expect." She studied the battlefield, her mind racing. The Harvesters optimized. They adapted. They learned. But they did so based on logical assessment of threats. What would they not expect? Then she had it. "General, order the Endeavour to ram the Scout. Full speed." "Are you insane? We'll be destroyed." "No, we won't. Trust me." She opened a channel to brightness. "Can your people create a gravitational distortion? Make it look like we're going to hit but bend our trajectory at the last second?" There was a pause. Then brightness responded. "Possible. Difficult. Dangerous. But possible. Do it." The Endeavour suddenly accelerated, all engines firing at maximum. It was the least efficient, least tactical move imaginable. A capital ship, using itself as a projectile against a smaller, more maneuverable target. The Harvester Scout's calculations must have flagged this as illogical, possibly a malfunction. It held position, weapons tracking the Endeavour, clearly planning to destroy the ship as it approached. But at the last moment, when the Endeavour was seconds from impact, the Vormu created a gravity well that bent space-time itself. The human ship curved impossibly, passing within meters of the Scout's hull without touching it. And in that moment of distraction, when the Scout systems were focused on the Endeavour, the Vormu fighters struck. They phased through the hull from multiple angles simultaneously, more than the Scout could possibly defend against. Inside the ship, they didn't try to destroy it. Instead, following Sarah's instructions relayed through quantum communication, they targeted specific systems: navigation, power distribution, self-destruct mechanisms. The Harvester Scout went dark, dead in space but intact. The fleet held position, weapons trained on the disabled vessel, waiting for a self-destruct that never came. Minutes passed. Then Keeper's voice came over the communication network, tinged with what might have been awe. "It worked. The Scout is disabled, but intact. Its self-destruct system never activated. This is unprecedented. General Okonkwo looked at Sarah with something like respect. Sometimes I think you're as crazy as the harvesters think we all are. Retha. That's the idea, Sarah replied with a tired smile. The disabled scout was carefully towed back to the convergence station. Over the next days, Keeper worked with human and Cathara technicians to access its systems. The technology was alien in ways that made even assembly designs seem familiar. But gradually they cracked the encryption. What they found changed everything. The Scout's navigation database contained the location of the main harvester fleet. It was in dark space between galaxies, exactly as suspected. But more importantly, it contained the activation timeline. The main fleet was not yet fully awake. It would take time, years even, for the massive ships to power up from hibernation. But the countdown had already started. The Scouts had sent enough preliminary data. The main fleet was beginning to stir. We have perhaps 5 years, Keeper calculated. Maybe less if more Scouts report successfully. The main fleet will come to this galaxy. Nothing can stop that now. But we might be able to destroy it before it arrives in force. The plan that emerged was desperate and brilliant. They would take the fight to the harvesters. A strike force would travel to the dark space coordinates, hitting the main fleet while it was still vulnerable. It was a suicide mission by any rational calculation, but as Sarah had noted, humans were good at irrational decisions. The Endeavor was retrofitted with every weapon system the assembly archives could provide. Cathara ships were armored with experimental materials. The Vormu prepared energy weapons of incredible power, and Keeper began manufacturing drone vessels, automated ships that could be sacrificed without risking biological lives. Earth was informed of the plan. The response was mixed. Some called for evacuation, for humanity to flee to distant galaxies, and hoped the harvesters never found them. But others, inspired by Sarah's team and the alliance they had built, voted to fight. Reinforcements began arriving at the convergence. More human ships, more Cathara, from distant vaults, Vormu by the hundreds, drawn by the promise of revenge against the enemy that had destroyed their civilization. The assembly of voices was reborn. Smaller than before, limited to 4 species and scattered remnants, but alive. And this time, they would not wait for the enemy to come to them. 6 months after capturing the scout vessel, the strike force departed. 20 ships in total, carrying representatives from all 4 civilizations. The Endeavor led the way, Sarah on its bridge alongside General Okonkwo. The journey to dark space took weeks. They passed beyond the galaxy's edge, into the void between star islands, where light itself seemed to thin. And there, exactly where the Scouts' data had indicated, they found the nightmare. The harvester fleet floated in formation, thousands of ships ranging from small corvettes to vast dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the assembly had ever built. Most were dark, dormant, but a few showed signs of activity. They were waking up. There are so many, Sarah whispered, staring at the tactical display. Yes, Keeper said, but most are still unpowered, still vulnerable. We must strike now, before more awaken. The battle that followed would be remembered as the Battle of Dark Space, the moment when the galaxy's survivors made their stand. The strike force split into groups, each targeting clusters of hibernating ships. The Vormu led the assault, their energy forms able to phase through hulls and detonate power cores from within. Human ships provided covering fire, their weapons adapted with assembly technology cutting through harvester armor. The Cathara used gravity weapons to collapse ship structures. Keeper's drones ran interference, drawing fire from awakened harvester vessels while the biological crews struck at the sleeping giants. It was chaos. It was desperate. Ships were lost. Brave souls sacrificed themselves to take down targets. Sarah watched friends die, watched Vormu dissipate, and Cathara ships torn apart. But they kept fighting, because this was what humanity did. When faced with extinction, When confronted with impossible odds, humans did not calculate surrender. They calculated how much damage they could inflict before going down. And it turned out, when supported by allies who shared that determination, they could inflict a lot of damage. Hours into the battle, with half the strike force destroyed or disabled, Keeper calculated that they had destroyed nearly 60% of the Harvester main fleet. Thousands of ships that would never threaten the galaxy again. But the remainder were waking up, and they were adapting. "We cannot win a prolonged engagement," Keeper advised. "We must withdraw." "Not yet," Sarah said, studying the tactical display. She had noticed something. The awakened Harvester ships were all converging on the strike force, leaving the still dormant vessels undefended. "We have one more trick." She explained her plan quickly. It was insane. But then, she had been making insane plans this whole time. The Vormu gathered together, combining their energy matrices into something unprecedented. A single, unified consciousness. Temporary but immensely powerful, they phased deep into the Harvester formation, past the awakened ships, into the heart of the sleeping fleet. And there, they created a star. Not a real star, but close enough. A fusion reaction, initiated by sheer concentrated energy, sustained for just seconds, but releasing catastrophic radiation. The dormant Harvester ships, their shields unpowered, their systems inactive, were consumed in the blast. The explosion was visible even from the Endeavor, a new sun born and dying in the darkness between galaxies. When it faded, the Harvester fleet was broken. Scattered debris and guttering hulls were all that remained of the armada that had once destroyed thousands of civilizations. The Vormu survivors, fewer now but triumphant, returned to the fleet. The remaining Harvester ships, perhaps 100 out of thousands, fled into deep space. The battle of dark space was over. Against all odds, the Alliance had won. The journey home took months. The battered fleet limped back to the Convergence, carrying their wounded and their dead, carrying also the news that would change the galaxy forever. The Harvesters had been defeated. Not completely, not permanently, but decisively. The main fleet was destroyed. The threat that had haunted the Assembly of Voices for 80,000 years was broken. When the Endeavor docked at the Convergence station, Sarah stood in the observation deck one last time, looking out at the ships gathering there. More arrived every day, species that had hidden for millennia, emboldened by the victory. New civilizations that had developed in isolation, drawn by broadcasts of the Assembly's return. Historian found her there, its colors shifting through patterns that Sarah had learned meant contentment. "Your species is remarkable," the Cathara said. "You answered a signal no one else dared to answer. You faced enemies that destroyed the old Assembly. You did the impossible." "Anyone. We had help," Sarah replied. "We couldn't have done it alone. Perhaps. But you were the ones who spoke when others were silent. You were the ones who said yes when caution demanded no. The galaxy has been quiet for 80,000 years." Sarah Chen. But humanity made it loud again. Sarah smiled, thinking about the long journey that had brought them here. From a small research station orbiting Neptune to the rebirth of a galactic civilization, it had started with a simple decision: to answer a call from the void. To believe that not being alone was worth any risk. "The Assembly of Voices has returned," she said softly, echoing the words from the message they had sent out to any remaining survivors. Outside the window, more ships arrived. Representatives from species humanity had never dreamed existed. All drawn by the beacon that had waited 80,000 years for someone brave enough to answer. The galaxy was alive again. And humanity, the young species that had dared to speak into the darkness, had helped make it so. This was just the beginning.